Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Grohoski. I'm the state representative for House District 132, which is the city of Ellsworth in the town of Trenton. I'm pleased to be here with you all today. Thank you for joining on a holiday, and we are excited to be introducing legislation to establish a more reliable, affordable, and locally controlled electricity utility, aptly named Pine Tree Power Company. We really appreciate you all coming out today on a state holiday, Patriots Day, which I believe is apropos given our effort to create an energy future for Maine that is of, for, and by the people, rather than of foreign corporations and for their immense profit. Today we will also hear from Senator Rick Bennett of Norway, Representative Nathan Carlo of Buxton, Representative Seth Berry of Rotherham, Sharon Stas, former General Manager of Kennebunk Light and Power District, and Vaughn Woodruff, founder of InSource Renewables. Most of us don't think much about how we get our electricity until something goes wrong. But here in Maine, that happens all too often. Our electrical grid should perform day in and day out and not break the bank for Maine's people, small businesses, and competitive industries. Our grid is the backbone of our efforts to shift from using polluting fossil fuels to locally produced clean energy as we electrify our economy in the face of a changing climate. Now, more than ever, we need a reliable and affordable grid. Unfortunately, CMP and Versant power customers aren't served by a 21st century grid. The length and frequency of our power outages earns us the distinction of worst in the nation reliability. Our costs for electricity delivery are steadily increasing with no end in sight. Case in point, Versant has just proposed a 25% rate increase. Instead of investing that money into grid updates, our major utilities send it abroad as profits to their shareholders. But here in Maine, we have a group of not-for-profit, consumer-owned utilities that raise the bar. They provide reliable service at exceptionally low costs. Maine's for-profit investor-owned utilities, CMP and Versant, are charging Maine households 58% more than our consumer-owned utilities. That's right, 58% more. In fact, if CMP and Versant charged the same average rate as our consumer-owned utilities, Mainers would save $155 million per year on their home electricity bills. We simply cannot afford to keep hemorrhaging profits to governments and shareholders in other parts of the world. Maine's consumer-owned utilities aren't managed by magicians. Without a mandate to earn income for shareholders, they can invest any profits right back into the system. They can access low-cost capital through revenue bonds to make infrastructure upgrades. And they are managed locally and transparently by our friends and neighbors. They really do have our best interests in mind. We know we'll need to expand our grid over the next few decades to handle more electricity. With Pine Tree Power Company, Mainers can save $9 billion over the next 30 years by using low-interest bonds available to a consumer-owned utility to build the infrastructure that we need, according to a study by economist Dr. Richard Silver. It's like switching from high rent to a lower mortgage payment when you buy a house. Today, I join my colleagues in a growing coalition of Maine people, including utility experts, business leaders, conservationists, and faith leaders, to support Pine Tree Power. We stand together because we know that Maine people want and deserve more affordable, reliable, and cleaner electricity. Thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Senator Rick Bennett of Oxford, former Senator President, to share his thoughts.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Maine is largely a rural state. The people of rural Maine, who I represent, depend on electricity more than ever. In Western Maine, our future depends on jobs and small businesses that rely on the poles and lines that bring us power and internet services too. Electricity is essential to Maine homes and businesses and is becoming more important every day. In addition to running lights and appliances in homes and machinery in factories, we we are increasingly dependent on electricity for communicating, working, learning, and recreating online, as well as heating with heat pumps, charging vehicles, and more. The reality is that we are driving toward a carbon-neutral, electricity-powered economy, and those owning and operating our electric utility monopolies in Maine have been happy collecting ratepayer checks while ignoring the future. Right now, foreign governments and foreign corporations own Maine's major electric utility monopolies, CMP and Versant. This ownership model has been a disaster, draining money from Maine while leaving us with the most outages, the longest outages, the worst customer service, and among the highest rates in the country. I believe Maine people deserve the right to self-determination, and the Pine Tree Power Company will provide just that by serving Maine people instead of distant company shareholders in foreign lands. Right now, foreign corporations and stockholders rake in billions of dollars from Maine, while we are left in the dark ages with inadequate infrastructure to serve us today, never mind tomorrow. Pine Tree Power will be a consumer-owned nonprofit operated in the private sector, managed on behalf of Mainers and accountable only to us. To make needed investments, Pine Tree Power will be able to float its own bonds at extremely low interest rates and no need for profit. It will not use state bonds or state tax dollars. Long ago, CMP was a company that served Maine, but not anymore. Spanish energy giant Iberdrola bought CMP's parent company in 2008 and then reorganized its U.S. holdings under an investor-owned publicly traded company headquartered in Connecticut. All CMP profits go to those investors. Versant is wholly owned by the city of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, sending all of its profits there. Maine deserves a utility that puts Maine people and local small businesses first, not profits for big transnational corporations. We need a utility that serves the people, not itself. We deserve infrastructure to serve us well now and in the coming decades that will allow rural Maine to prosper. That's why I support working together to create the Pine Tree Power Company, our best shot to achieving lower cost, reliable power under local control, managed on behalf of Mainers and accountable only to us. I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Representative Nathan Carlo of Buxton, a member of the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Nathan Carlo. I reside in the town of Buxton, and I have the privilege of representing the good people of House District 16 in the Maine State Legislature. I'm here today because I know that electricity is central to our quality of life and the future of the Maine people and the businesses that support our economy. Young Mainers, my contemporaries, will live with the decisions we make today. These decisions will affect our prosperity, our businesses, and the planet that we leave to future generations as well. The facts are clear. Investor-owned utilities are no longer meeting the needs of the Maine people, and they haven't been for a long time. In addition to my legislative duties, I sit on the Bonnie Eagle School Board of Directors. I have served in this capacity for more than 4 years. The crucial decisions that are made by school boards all over our country have such a significant impact on the communities that they serve. This is why school board members are elected, and they are accountable only to the communities that they're elected from. Now imagine for just a moment if instead of locally elected school boards of education making decisions for our schools and our students, we had foreign, for-profit corporations setting policy, raising costs, and presiding over a steep decline in the quality of service. I would strongly oppose this hypothetical scenario, and I don't think it's a good way to operate the electric utilities that we depend upon either. Pine Tree Power Company legislation we're proposing today offers a common sense solution to strengthen our grid reduce outages and lower rates for the people of Maine and businesses. It will advance Maine's carbon emission goals so that we can do our part to protect the natural resources that Mainers cherish and depend on. They will promote broadband internet connection by establishing consumer ownership of the lines and poles throughout our state that deliver this critical technology to our homes. They will make ratepayers the primary decision makers in our electric industry, and combined, these improvements will encourage young people from all over the country to live, work, and raise their families here in Maine. It will attract businesses, jobs, and the economic benefits that are attached to that growth. These are the reasons why I'm working collaboratively with other lawmakers to establish Pine Tree Power, a Maine consumer-owned utility working for the Maine people, not Spain, not Calgary, and not profit-seeking investors in other parts of the world. Thank you. Pleased to introduce Sharon Stas, the former general manager of the Kennebunk consumer-owned utility there. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm Sharon Stas, the former general manager of Kennebunk Light and Power, and I'm here today to express my strong support for creating Pine Tree Power, a consumer-owned, not-for-profit utility for Maine, for the purpose of purchasing and then operating the assets of CMP and Versant's for-profit, shareholder-owned utility monopolies. I want to tell you a little bit about consumer-owned utilities. Like the proposed Pine Tree Power Company, are a tried and true way to deliver locally controlled, reliable power at lower costs. Consumer-owned utilities already serve 97 towns in Maine, from Calais to Kennebunk, and they have proven themselves nationwide as well. We serve over benefits to 1 in 3 Americans, from down east Maine to Nebraska to Florida and California. Like all consumer-owned electric utilities, Kennebunk Light and Power is owned by its customers and dedicated to serving them, as are our colleagues in all of the communities we serve. Our boards are elected by the people, and members serve terms on a rotating basis. KLPD, for instance, the board members have 5-year terms, and 1 member is up for election every year. Unlike CMP and Versant, all meetings of consumer-owned utilities are open to the public and welcome public input. All records are public too. Consumer-owned utilities are transparent. They're dedicated to putting the customer needs first by providing reliable power at the lowest possible cost. Consumer-owned utilities operate as non-profits, unlike CMP and Versant, as you've heard, that seek the highest profits possible and send those returns, our money, to distant shores. Kennebunk Light and Power is more reliable than neighboring CMP, while experiencing the same weather conditions as the rest of York County and the state of Maine. And KLP customers receive great service while paying low rates for power delivery, far less than those in the surrounding neighboring towns served by CMP. The same is true of the customers of consumer-owned utilities, including Madison Electric Works, just west of Augusta, and those in northern and eastern Maine, Holton, Van Buren, and Eastern Maine Electric Co-op that covers 77 towns spanning an area twice the size of Rhode Island and surrounded by Versant. Consumer-owned utilities listen to their customers they serve. When a customer comes to us with a concern over a bill or over service or over trees, we're there to help them. As proposed in the coming bill, Pine Tree Power will be completely separate from the state, just like our existing 9 COUs. It will be a non-profit owned by customers but operated in the private sector. It will float its own bonds at extremely low interest costs with no need for profit. It will not use state bonds or state dollars. Customers will pay half as much to finance the infrastructure improvements we need to strengthen Maine's electric grid to support the needs of the 21st century especially in the area of renewables and storage and beyond. Pine Tree Power will look to the future, making sure we meet our climate and connectivity goals. Our new bill puts this mission front and center. The utility I managed, KLPD, looked to the future too. In 2014, it installed 2 solar power electric vehicle charging stations to help boost the local economy and the tourist economy. The solar arrays produce all of the electricity needed for providing charging to those electric vehicles, and it saves our customers money because the excess is returned into our grid. In 2017, KLPD signed a 20-year power purchase agreement to buy solar power from a new solar array built by NextEra Energy and located in Kennebunk. In 2016, the consumer-owned utility of Madison Electric Works signed a 25-year power supply agreement with IGS that built an array in Madison that will serve approximately 20% of the town's needs. In short, I think it is imperative that we establish Pine Tree Power to help Mainers protect our environment, lower costs over the long term, increase the reliability of the grid, and to give us all a voice in the company we will own. It's a pleasure to introduce Vaughn Woodruff. He's from Pittsfield. He's the founder and former CEO of InSource Renewables and past chair of Maine's Solar Industrial Trade Group. Woodruff will speak to the need for this legislation to allow, encourage, and enable clean renewable energy sources to be developed in Maine, employ Maine people, and prevent drastic climate change for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you to the speakers who've already spoken so eloquently on the needs that have brought us today to move towards a new ownership model for our utilities. I think it's impossible to look at where we are today without also acknowledging the crisis that we face with regards to our climate. One of the things that I've really appreciated about Maine growing up here is our ability to collaboratively act when times of crisis arise. We see it within the last year during COVID. We see it within our small towns when crisis arrives. And the thing that rises up is collaboration. And as we look from a utility scale at how we manage climate change, which is significantly dependent upon our energy industries, it's important to look at who's at the table for us to work with. And the energy industry shows us dramatically what occurs when collaboration happens. There are 6 utility districts in the country who have switched to 100% renewable energy. All of them are consumer-owned utilities. Here in Maine for the last decade, I have stood in these buildings around us on behalf of Maine's solar industry and seen the opposite of collaboration, obstruction, working towards one's most financial benefit when that financial benefit is for shareholders instead of for the ratepayers they serve. It's imperative that we as a state look at the models that have worked as we look at crises that are moving forward. It's going to ask more of us. It's going to ask more of our utilities moving forward. And the collaborative nature of the parties that are at the table will be the difference between success and failure. And when it comes to responding to the climate crisis, there is no room for failure. As has been mentioned earlier, we're going to see a significant amount of investment in our utility grid. Billions of dollars, from clean generation to electrifying transportation to efforts that Maine has led the way on with regards to clean heat through efficient heat pumps, as well as through energy efficiency. All of these cross paths with our utilities. If we continue with the path that we have now, which are utilities that are at the table only willing to compromise on things that benefit them, there is no way as a state that we will ever fulfill the climate goals that we have set, the economic goals that we have set, nor respond to the climate crisis in the way that Mainers are truly capable.
Thank you very much. And it's my distinct honor to introduce a man who's dedicated countless hours and days and years to holding our utilities accountable, and I'm pleased to hear him speak today on the need for a consumer-owned utility here in Maine. So without further ado, Representative Seth Berry.
Thank you very much, Vaughn. Good afternoon, everyone. 12 years ago today, the people of Lexington and Concord rose up against abuse by a foreign power whose only purpose was to extract wealth from its distant colonies. Today, we, the people of Maine, rise to assert our power and our independence. Our new bipartisan bill, an act to create the Pine Tree Power Company, will let us control our own money and our own energy destiny. It will let us advance both fast and fairly toward our own clean energy and connectivity goals. Our bill is new, improved, and better than ever. Its full name is an act to create the Pine Tree Power Company, a nonprofit utility to deliver lower rates, reliability, and local control for Maine clean energy independence. It does not yet have an LD number, but it will soon. Every month, the 800,000 captive customers of CMP and Versant pay monopoly rent for the use of a monopoly grid. With Pine Tree Power Company, we will pay a lower monthly bill. This will no longer be a rental payment, but a mortgage payment. We will save money, invest in and improve our grid, and build our own equity. In 2005, the people of Winter Park, Florida were tired of long outages from hurricanes. So they voted to buy out their part of a larger for-profit utility. That large utility attacked the people of Winter Park. They spent millions on misleading ads. They claimed the sky would fall, but Winter Park became independent anyway. 16 years later, that new nonprofit utility has buried almost all its power lines and has almost no outages ever. And compared to the utility they separated from, rates are lower too. This same story has unfolded multiple times in other locations, even statewide in Nebraska in the 1940s, thanks to a U.S. Republican senator named George Norris. To create Pine Tree Power, we will not use a penny in tax dollars. Pine Tree Power will not be statewide, since 97 towns are already served by 9 existing consumer-owned utilities. CMP and Versant top management will be replaced, but workers and middle management will keep their jobs and earn a bonus for making the transition. The people of Maine will directly elect all voting members of the nonprofit Pine Tree Power Company board. Board meetings will be fully public and transparent. The Pine Tree Power Company will have a clear and mandatory mission: improve our reliability and customer service, keep our rates low, and be sure we meet or exceed our climate and connectivity goals. The Pine Tree Power Company will be a public-private hybrid with the best of both sectors. As a nonprofit independent entity, it will be publicly accountable and have access to low-cost capital, allowing us to finance a fast and fair transition. But with a private operations team who replaces top management and who are paid based on performance, Pine Tree Power will also benefit from the sharpened pencils and competitive edge of the market. History is a great teacher. Once upon a time, a backwater city in Tennessee had electricity only for the 5% who were white and wealthy. But then, a consumer-owned utility was created. And within a few years, Chattanooga was electrified, with every home able to afford lighting and radios and refrigeration. Fast forward to 2005, and a new inequality had emerged in Chattanooga. A few had expensive high-speed cable internet, but most did not. So Chattanooga's electrical utility went into broadband. Fiber optic cable was strung on every pole, connected to every building and every home. Today, Chattanooga is the gig city, with a bustling and entrepreneurial renaissance that is the envy of the nation, and with lightning-fast, affordable gigabit service available to every home and business. This, too, is the power and potential of consumer ownership. The Pine Tree Power Company will reduce the costs and delays of pole access in our rural areas, working closely and proactively with our competitive internet service providers to light up every part of Maine with affordable, high-speed internet. At this historic watershed moment for both the internet and our energy, the Pine Tree Power Company, is the right tool for the job. Today you've heard from just a few of my amazing colleagues in the growing movement we call Our Power. You've heard that from coast to coast, serving 1 in 3 Americans in 97 Maine towns, consumer-owned utilities are lower cost, locally accountable, and twice as reliable. You've heard that in Maine, CMP and Versant charge 58% more to deliver power than our outstanding locally accountable COUs. You've learned that 12 of the 12 top-rated utilities in the nation, 11 are consumer-owned utilities. And you've learned that all 6 U.S. communities who have reached 100% renewables, all 6, were powered by consumer-owned utilities. These are the facts about consumer ownership. They're the truths we cannot toss aside. You can learn more at ourpowermaine.org. You can also take action, donate, and join us. We hope you will. On this Patriots Day 2021, the people of Maine have news for today's great proprietors. No longer will we relinquish our power. From this day forward, we will not rest until we are free of energy monopoly, energy colonialism, and energy tyranny. We will take back our power, not because we are Republicans, Independents, or Democrats, but because we are Maine. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of our work ethic and ingenuity and community spirit. We're proud of our strong tradition of self-governance. We intend to lift up every corner of our state. We intend to face our energy future together, bound by our common enterprise, bound together by the network of poles and wires we will soon proudly call the Pine Tree Power Company. We know we cannot afford to keep trusting those who have failed us year after year and do not have our interests in mind. It is far, far too risky to keep accepting IOUs as an answer to our energy needs. So today we declare our independence. Today we bid au revoir and adios to monopoly rent, and hello to consumer ownership. Today we embrace our future, we embrace our possibility, we embrace our power, the power of our majestic Pine Tree State. Thank you all very much for attending today. Representative Grohoski and I are happy to answer any detailed questions about the proposed legislation or the Pine Tree Power Coalition.
Do you have Since you're talking about a bond issue, you certainly must have contemplated a price, what you need to raise to purchase these 2 private companies. Any idea what kind of dollar figure you're talking about? And what if they say, no thanks, we're not for sale?
First of all, thank you, Phil, for the question, and it's a good one. The LEI report, which the legislature commissioned 2 years ago, came back saying this would be a net benefit in their reference case, their most likely scenario. We believe it's actually a significantly more savings than that. As I said earlier, it's like going from a monthly rental payment to a monthly mortgage, but there is no state bond. I just want to be really clear about that. There's no state bond issue required. Utilities finance by borrowing against their future revenue. We have spoken with a number of large investment banks, globally renowned investment banks, and they said, yep, you can do this. We'd be very happy to lend to you. You'd have an excellent bond rating, and you would save money.
What's the dollar figure, and what if they say no thank you?
The current net book value of both companies is on file at the PUC and at FERC. It's a fairly large number. They will argue that they're worth even more than their own figures say. But what's important is how it's financed. Right now, we are paying weighted average cost of capital of 8% for every dollar of their value. That's how our rates are calculated. So the more that their value is, the more you and I pay, and the more we save by borrowing at a lower cost of capital. Next question.
You mentioned that this bill is new and improved. I assume you're referring to your 2019, not 2009.
That's
Can you
right.
explain the differences between this bill and that one?
Sure. If you want to add anything, feel free. But the elected board is one critical piece. We have a seven voting member elected board, as well as an additional 4 members who are chosen by that elected board as expert advisory members, but non-voting. So that's a very key difference. We've also incorporated very helpful suggestions from the London Economics Report around the transition and how it's financed. In addition, we have a clarified mission statement, additional protections for workers, and additional protections for communities.
Can you explain the transition piece a little bit more in detail?
The transition piece, as I said, is about refinancing at a lower cost of capital. Typically, the utilities try to litigate, and they will. I guarantee when you go and ask them, they'll threaten to sue. They'll say it's going to take a long time. That's because they're threatening to sue you and me, the people of Maine. So just be clear about that. That's what they're really saying. The LEI report came back saying this is fully legal, that we absolutely have the right to do it. Remember, 20 years ago, we required the utilities to sell off all of their generation. So more than half the value of the utilities at that time was sold by an act of the legislature because of the order to divest. Maine Yankee was sold. Wyman Station was sold. All of generation assets, the dams. So the legal precedent is very clear. The LEI report has said that we simply need to revoke the monopoly franchise. It's a privilege that we accord them in the law, and then pay them what they're worth. The courts will help us to establish that, but there is a refereed process, which LEI recommended, that we've also inserted in there. That will help to make it happen faster.
The one thing I'd like to add is that it's really important to me and to my community and all the communities in the state that they receive the same amount of payment in lieu of taxes for the assets that are within your jurisdictions, and we've clarified that in this legislation as well this year, because we're not trying to break the bank for a community which is struggling in many ways to pay for their essential services. I just want to clarify that. And I also wanted to add that these two utilities serve here in a monopoly fashion because we allow them to and because we attempt to regulate them. I think our attempts to regulate them have failed. That's why we have such terrible service and high costs. And so instead of regulating a for-profit company, this is an effort to create a nonprofit company that, yes, will need to be regulated, but is there to serve us. The only reason they can do business here in a monopolistic fashion is because we permit them access. We can revoke that access at any time.
You said they had the worst reliability record. In what way, and what's your source for that?
Yep, you can take a look at the Energy Information Administration. We've provided that information, I believe, to you. But we have the longest and the most frequent outages in the nation here in Maine.
That's
I
not
don't think
because
our
of the
weather
weather.
is
That's really their
significant.
fault. It's not our weather.
I don't think our weather is significantly different from New Hampshire, Vermont, North Dakota. You name it, there's hurricanes, fires, tornadoes. Wherever you live in this country, there are challenges. And we are not meeting those challenges here.
The 2019 bill got turned into a study committee and then later died during special session, or the lack thereof. What makes you think this one will be more successful?
Sure. So we did do some very significant due diligence. I'm very happy with that. I think the time spent doing the LEI study and then having some peer reviews done, which have helped us to really quantify the savings, to know that there will be savings from year one, mounting over time, to know that it is fully legal and fully reliable to go forward in this way, have been very helpful. it did require some additional time to bring more people on board and to help us understand it, and it also resulted in some of the improvements to the bill that we have just spoken about. So I'm very happy that we took the extra time for it. Obviously, the legislature, the 129 having been cut short, did prevent us from taking action. But that's why we have, that's why we continue. And, certainly we are serious about this. We are not going away. We're going to keep at it until we get it done.
Question for Mr. Bennett or Mr. Carlo. As Republicans, I would think some people in your party are going to say this is socialism. This is a takeover of private companies. Tell me why that's not the case.
These are natural regulated monopolies, and as a consequence, the ownership matters most. And here we're not taking state ownership. This is about the consumers owning this and running it. And for me, lots of Republicans I talk to, local ownership of these critical infrastructure assets is vastly superior under whatever form than foreign ownership. And people scratch their heads when I talk to them. How did we end up with these critical assets that we all depend on, owned by foreign entities, foreign corporations, foreign governments? It doesn't make sense to anybody, and it doesn't make sense to Republicans, it doesn't make sense to Democrats, independents. Across the spectrum, I think this concern is shared, that we need to take, as Representative Berry said, our power back at this critical moment. And the model of consumer ownership has worked a lot in Republican areas of the country. Nebraska is not exactly a Democratic area, and it's worked very well there. And it's worked in great parts of our state that are not what you'd call Democratic areas either. So I don't think it really matters. I think people are ready to get things done in their interest. And party label and the usual ideologies do not prevail.
No questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So I agree with what Senator Bennett just said. Thank you for the question. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is about how we're going to improve our electric utility, how we're going to save the Maine people from costly, as this graphic clearly demonstrates, costly increases in rates over the long term. This is a question about sovereignty. This is a question about whether or not we are going to allow foreign companies, for-profit companies, dictate how we're going to run our electric utility here in Maine. And I'm glad that Senator Bennett pointed out the fact that consumer-owned utilities are not uncommon in very Republican parts of this country. Thank you again for the question.
Yeah.
So, anyone can probably answer this, but when this will probably, when it gets voted and implemented, you were talking about something about first giving electricity and utility to communities that are not run by Versant, or could you just tell me what that plan looks like, and who's gonna get it first?
Sure. So there are, as we mentioned, 97 towns that are served in whole or in part in Maine. That's more than a fifth of the state, by the way, in whole or in part by existing consumer-owned utilities. They would remain as they are. So the remainder of the state, in green, as this excellent map shows, would become the Pine Tree Power Company. In 1998, in Long Island, they did this. Rates went down immediately 20%. The other change that people noticed was that their bill had a different header on it. It came from a different company with a different name. But that is what you would immediately recognize is a change in rates. We might not go for 20%. We might lower it by a little bit less, simply to make sure that we can invest in the grid. There will be a lot of money, and this chart indicates that it can be used for two purposes: to reduce rates and to improve service and reliability. So we're gonna do a little bit of both, actually a lot of both with the savings. But does that help your question? I mean, it's the green areas of this that are on this map that would experience the difference, not the entire state.
That helps.
Great.
how would this affect line workers? And I mean, are they just going to eventually wake up one day and have to change the logos on the trucks, or I mean, what's kind of their experience going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question, and yes, the logos on the trucks will change. That might not be the top priority, but it will happen. The other thing for line workers and customers, billing specialists and whatnot, is they keep their jobs. That's a very important thing to know. The bill protects their jobs, it protects their pensions, it protects their benefits, it protects their ability to bargain. And if the two bargaining units are ever put together, it needs to go to the higher of the two. There's also, importantly, retention benefit in there. As long, obviously change is hard. We've got a new boss, so we provide for 6% retention bonus after the first year, another 4% after the second year, and that's because we want them, right? They're very valuable. Our line workers and the other workers of our utilities are excellent. It's the top management, and only the top management, that would be replaced. Yeah.
I just want to make it clear. So, this is a law that was established a nonprofit, but it would not be owned by the state, right? Can you explain to me how that works? I mean, is there a comparable agency? I mean, can we think of this almost like a turnpike or something? I mean,
there are a number of entities that are somewhat like it, but I hesitate to suggest any one because it is unique. The Efficiency Maine Trust is quasi-independent. The Housing Authority has some degree of independence. The Turnpike Authority certainly has independence and is able to issue its own revenue bonds and does not depend on tax dollars. Maine doesn't. I think the closest to this entity is probably our existing consumer-owned utilities, and we've spoken about them. There are 9. They charge a lot less and do a lot better by their customers. Their board meetings are fully public. Again, we would elect the board directly. It's a quasi-municipal corporation under Maine law, which may have some meaning to you, but it provides them, the new entity a degree of clarity about how it's financed. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I hope that helps. Again, separate from the state, it has a private operator model, so it's both public and private. And the law requires that it not use state tax dollars, not use state bonds. All of these savings you see are net, and they include the actual purchase of the utility. Yeah.
For me, in my work, the governance of this entity is very important. And if you look carefully at the governance structure in the bill when it becomes available, you'll see that there are elected members of the board. And then beyond that, there are appointed members of the board. The appointed members of the board are non-voting and is selected by the elected members of the board. So it is not under any state control at all. The governor's not appointing, the legislature's not appointing. It will be established from the beginning as an independent, not-for-profit corporation. And it's not going to rely on the state for money. It's not going to rely on the state taxpayer, bond payer. It's going to be its own entity, independently chartered, with its own independently elected leadership.
So the short answer is there's nothing quite like it.
Can I follow up with that real quick?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So the idea is that, can you just explain revoking the monopoly? I mean, is it that easy that you kind of flip a switch and say, no, you don't own these assets anymore, we'll pay them for you, but...
Yes, in fact, and this is a really important point. Maine law already provides that a simple majority vote of the 3-member Public Utilities Commission can find a utility unfit and require them to sell. So that's an authority that's conferred by the legislature, and the legislature can also direct that action. In this instance, we would be directing the action. These 2 utilities have failed us. They're the worst and the 3rd worst ranked by their customers on a national survey. They give us the worst reliability in the nation over the last 5 years. They charge 58% more than our existing consumer-owned utilities, and we have the 11th highest rates in the nation. So, no matter how you slice it, they have failed us, and it is time to show some spine and to revoke that monopoly privilege. Other questions?
Is the Pine Tree Power Company, is that a 501c3? Or would it be?
It would be a not-for-profit, but not configured as quite as a 501c3. No.
Okay. You talk about this effort having a coalition of supporters. Can you talk a little bit more about who's working with you?
Sure. Well, we do have both a 501c3 and a C4 as well. Our Power is a growing coalition. We're very proud of it. We encourage you to check out our website. And we have been buoyed up by supporters from the nonprofit world, the faith community, environmentalists, utility and energy experts. Maine has many retirees who are dedicating countless hours to this on their own, and organizational support as well. It's been a tremendous journey so far. We have business members, and Our Power is growing rapidly. We mean business, and we're gonna stay with it until we get the job done.
Could you be a little more specific about who? You mentioned some categories of support. Can you be specific about who some of them are?
It would take me a long time to list all of the members, and so I won't be doing that today. But I can tell you that we are very proud of our membership, and you'll be seeing some of the members at the public hearing. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious about what the next step is here. You don't have an LG number. I guess you don't have the language yet. When that comes out, what the public hearing is. What's
Right.
the timeline?
Yep. So the timeline is soon. The legislature certainly intends to move forward expeditiously on remaining legislation. The production offices here in the legislature, the nonpartisan production offices, are working hard to move all remaining bills forward. So I do expect to see it very soon printed and to be scheduled for a public hearing in our committee. Again, you have 3 members of that committee here today as well. Senator Bennett is an honorary member, so we're looking forward to the public hearing.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.